It seems that Logan Paul once again is under fire, and to be honest, with the reputation that this guy's got and the amount of shit that he has pulled on over the years, I'm not really surprised that this has come out. So one of the ex-co-hosts of Impulsive, George Janko, made his own podcast a long time ago, even when he was still on the Impulsive podcast as well. He had his own show running. But recently, a couple days ago, he released his own episode with Mike, who is still a co-host on the Impulsive podcast as well. And supposedly, George and Mike spoke a lot on this podcast about how, this episode of George's podcast, about how they're still friends. But they, majority of the time, like the big outline of that episode, which I didn't watch the whole entire thing because it goes for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But I just mainly watched the sections and watched a few clips just to get some context about what they were like, about the real topic that I'm going to be really talking about in this video, of why George really left the Impulsive podcast and how he felt he was treated negatively on that podcast as well, especially in the episode with Bobby Lee.
And I'll just say this, we'll just empty it out. I never had a problem with Bobby Lee.
No, he knows that.
I had a problem with the way that Logan and you were kind of gassing him to keep doing. He started the episode putting his balls in my face. I let that one go. Then every 2 seconds, he kept grabbing my dick.
I don't think...
How would you feel if a man that has his back completely towards you, that only turns around to grab your dick,
right,
talk shit to your face, and you can't smack or beat the living breaks off of this guy? Because Logan makes me apologize to this man, or I don't have a job on Impulsive anymore. How fucking crazy is that?
I don't think I understood. I can only speak for myself.
Bro, it's not a group chat.
I hope you can understand
it's not a group
that.
Chat.
No. I'm talking about during the episode because there was, I didn't know that you were feeling.
But after the episode, do you remember when you called me and I said, Mike, this is all that happens, and you said verbatim, you said, it's our fault for not telling you this, but me and Logan are really the ones who should be talking to the guest. You are really there for a boys only episode.
So as you can see by that clip there, and I recommend you going to watch at least that whole entire section. If you go on his George Janko show clips, he has his own clips channel as well. There's like a 27-minute clip of him talking about why he left the Impulsive podcast, and there's also a couple other clips from the main episode as well that kind of outline a lot about what really went on for George to want to leave the Impulsive podcast, and pretty much almost the rift that he still has between him and Logan, because they really didn't they delved into that a little bit, but I definitely see of why George would want to go ahead and not be a part of that show anymore. And the way that I was perceiving all of this, especially like I said, I watched all of the main section of where they really talked about why George left the show and how his relationship now is with Logan as well. And it seems like there is still, some bad blood put there. And I kind of don't blame him, because to me, the way it seems that he was treated on that show was almost like the fucking third wheel in this entire thing, where it was mainly just, Logan and Mike's show, more or less, even though, it is predominantly Logan Paul's podcast. It's called Impulsive, because Logan Paul and then, Impulsive, Paul. But it almost seems like he was meant to be the butt of the joke in every single episode. And one way that Mike describes it as well in another clip during this whole entire segment is that when it came to who they thought about first in every single episode, is that they cared about the integrity of the guest and didn't care about how, the episodes were cut and were made and what was said in the podcast to make, any of the co-hosts look good in any way. As a matter of fact, Mike even said it, and I think it's in the clip as well that I've got to show secondly, but Mike says it during this segment of where, they edit the episodes to make the guests that they have on the show look good, sometimes at the expense of George, Mike, and I feel like it wouldn't be Logan, because I feel like, it is obviously Logan's podcast, and they wouldn't, he himself wouldn't tell his editors to, make him look bad in any way possible. So it's really that, they try to make the guests look good at, George and Mike's expense, no matter what it is. And also, George kind of outlines it as well, that there's been a lot of things that have been cut out of episodes, and even Mike admits it as well, that there's been certain things to cut out of the episode to make the guests look actually better than they were. And you know what? At the end of that episode with Bobby Lee as well, George walks out And I don't fucking blame him. Like, imagine being in his state, that even though, yeah, you're there to do your job and your job is to be entertaining, your job is there to, you know, entertain the guests and make a great podcast or whatever. But when that guest is literally sexually harassing you at every single fucking moment, I would leave as well. Like, no matter how much he's getting paid, I wouldn't want to fucking sit there either. Like, I 100% would want to get up and leave that. Imagine just you're sitting there trying to do your job, and every few fucking minutes, someone turns around to grab your inner thigh. And it's like, you don't want that. That was not warranted whatsoever. I'm glad to hear that George himself, you know, it doesn't have any bad blood with Bobby Lee, at least at this point in time, or maybe, you know, he didn't in the past, but he says that, you know, he doesn't really have an issue with Bobby Lee. I'm not sure if that he meant that like before the podcast happened, because this whole thing happened like over a year and a half ago. So this happened a long time ago, but it doesn't really seem that, you know, all of this had really been addressed publicly, which I mean is fair enough because it is a somewhat serious situation. And not only did they talk about that situation as well, but it feels like that even if this situation didn't happen, to me it seems that whole entire episode with Bobby Lee was almost just like kind of like the pushing point for George, where it kind of made him, you know, really go, yep, that's the final straw where I've got to go ahead and leave this show. Another part that they talk about in the podcast was about how George had a sponsor for his podcast, Celsius, which is almost like it's pretty much a direct competitor with Prime. And Logan was not happy with that, which I mean, you can be somewhat understandable for that. But at the same time, Logan was trying to force him and say, you either get rid of that sponsorship or you're not going to have a job anymore.
You're more than welcome to rejoin the show if you need to make money.
But they're always trying to find a way to push me out.
I don't.
You know what he told me? When I told you know what I told him?
I think that was
this
a
is
fair.
A guy who's this is a guy who's sending us screenshots of $11 million a week that he's making. Okay, and on top of that, we never got any money from Prime, and we own that show. So technically, we should have gotten a percentage of that. I never asked for it like the way you did. I stayed the fuck out of it. I didn't care. Because I'm grateful for what I'm making. I'm going to go start my own business. But when I come over here, because I'm scared I'm going to lose my job here, and then you're saying no, I sent them out.
Not you're saying no. That's what. That once again, please, bro.
But let me just finish,
because that's one thing.
Wait,
like,
are you saying you?
Yes.
No,
well,
I'm not saying you.
Because
no,
it's
you.
one thing. It's one thing. Like with all of this, bro. With all of this, that you have to understand. He wasn't the only one that took hits for how the relationship ended with you. I got the same brunt, bro. I got the same brunt.
Okay,
I got
question,
and I only ever spoke highly.
Can I speak for a second, please?
Well, yeah, I mean.
So when I get that call and I tell him, I go, Logan, I get it, bro. And I fully told him, I go, listen, man, like, I will take half the deal that Celsius gives me. Half. If you want to put it on the table for my show, a quarter, work with me. He says, I won't pay you a dime. You're here because of me. And then I said, well, what do you want me to do for my bills, bro? I got no money. And he says, go have your rich dad pay for it.
Listen,
that's fighting words, bro. Look at me.
No,
that's fighting words, bro. You don't bring up somebody's father.
Would you say
bro.
that the way that you handled it from a word standpoint was mature, acceptable?
What did I say? That I beat the fucking brakes off of him?
Correct.
If he was in front of me, I would have swung at him.
But that's what I'm trying to say. We were at a point where no one was speaking properly to each other. And the only person, and George, and the only person probably that was the calmest out of the three, I sent you a very nice text message.
To me, this seems scummy as fuck. Like, George is meant to be your friend. Yeah, you gave him a job, but I hate when someone has that much of a fucking big ego and goes ahead and says like, I made you, you know, you wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for you. I mean, at the same time, if someone does give you a job, gives you an opportunity, and you are there because of someone, yes, you have to be grateful, but that person shouldn't go ahead and have the biggest fucking head on themselves and try to dictate every single thing that you do. And the fact that, like, George was like, hey, if you don't want Celsius to be on my show, you be the great person and match it. Match their offer. Let me make Prime sponsor my show. I mean, that's what I would do. If I had a podcast, if I was Logan Paul, if you literally put my brain into Logan Paul during that point in time, and you know, my friend who was on my podcast had his own show, one, I'd be happy for him and be like, great, get your fucking buck, get your shit. Two, I would 100% be like, you know, if someone came and sponsored him and he was just like, hey, these people want to sponsor me, they're a direct competitor to the company that you own, which is Prime. Do you reckon, you know, I would appreciate it if you could, you know, outdo what they did and put Prime on my show. I would be happier to have your product if you can match their deal. I would 100% say yes. Fucking oath. That's just more free advertisement and you're helping out your friend even more. And they also outlined as well, and George and Mike like both said this, about how they weren't even paid that well for the Impulsive podcast. Like, to me, Logan Paul seems like the scummiest fucking person. A greedy ass motherfucker. That's all he really seems. Like, I feel on the surface, he seems like this nice guy and all that shit. But I mean, here's the people see behind him. No one really likes him. And to be honest, at times I'm kind of like, I don't really know why people don't like him. But then I see shit like this and I 100% fucking understand it. Now, I'm not also saying that I don't think that George is in the wrong whatsoever, because whenever someone gives their point of view, they're obviously going to put it more in their favor. But I feel like the way it was described and the certain things that were said, I feel like even if I did get Logan's side, I feel like I still couldn't really, go off what he has to say, especially when it's Logan Paul as well. Because if he had to rebuttal against some of the things that were said on this podcast, I really couldn't trust that man. The amount of shit that comes out of that man's mouth, especially with like the whole crypto zoo situation that I covered, just his reputation, all the amount of shit that he's done in the past. To me, he just seems like a greedy ass person who just wants all the fame, all the money, and only cares about himself and has a really big fucking ego. So, to be honest, seeing all this stuff come out and what George was saying on his podcast about Logan and the reasons why he left the show, I 100% I recommend to you to go watch that whole entire segment as well to really get your perception, get your opinion on like the whole entire situation between George and Logan and why he left it. But I definitely side with George on this as well. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about this down below. That's it from me. Peace out.